Hello and welcome to Tokyo Inklings. My name is CY. You can find me and what I do on Instagram at Tokyo Station Pens and our brand at Khuê.
And my name is Jacob, and I'm mostly doing video nowadays. So I'm a Khuê fan on YouTube.
And hello and happy new year. My name is Khuê. You can find me on Instagram at midaikat.
And this is, according to my podcatcher, episode 85. We are once again back for our New Year episode, which is now somewhat of a tradition. And yet again, we are here with a very bright and sunny day. I think I talk about our bright and sunny day every single year. But of course, the difference this year is that we aren't at Inky Rocks, we aren't at Elisa's house anymore because she moved back to the United States. So, Elisa, if you're listening to this, we miss you a lot and hope you're doing well. Anyway, Jacob, Happy New Year. Khuê, Happy New Year. It is 11 o'clock here in the morning, and I know for me and probably for Khuê as well, we just woke up not so many hours ago. But Jacob, I suspect you have a head start in the year, so why don't you start us off?
Yeah, well, there's this thing called Hatsu Hinode, which is the first sunrise of the year, right? And you don't want to miss that. So I went up very early and I went on my long morning walk, and there's one place when you have a very nice view over the sunrise. So that was my morning. So it's midday for me here. I've been awake for 5 hours now.
And it was very crowded because everybody was doing it, right?
It's more common, it's more popular than you might think. Mostly older people, to which maybe I should count myself nowadays. But a lot of old people getting up early and watching the first sunrise of the year. And it's a sort of a social thing. Very nice.
Yeah. Meanwhile, here I am rubbing my eyes. Like, gotta wake up. Okay, how's your New Year been?
It was fun. So we have friends visiting from the UK. My childhood friend is here, and we have 4 kids in the house at the moment. So it was quite, let's say, noisy early morning. But we didn't just wake up, CY. We went to Akihabara this morning at 9:30 with the whole family and friends to do what? Not for stationery, right? To visit.
Yeah. We were trying to do some model kits. So, I also partook. But, yeah, this is a new year, old podcast. And why don't we start off the meat of this podcast by taking a reflection of 2024. And we traditionally did this just... Let's get a vibe check, Jacob. How was your 2024 in general?
I've been a bit out of the loop, at least for the first sort of half of the year, but I think not too much happened. At least that was my sense. But it got a bit more interesting toward the second half of the year. I've been sort of more following the news. So both there's been some interesting, paper developments, been some interesting, merger M&A activity in the stationery space, and there's been some interesting product launches. Overall, I would say that out of the big 3 Japanese stationery companies, I think Pilot has had, a fantastic year. The other 2, maybe not so much. That's my overall feeling.
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree with that. I like you, had not been really dialed into a lot of what's going on, especially in the first half of the year. I skipped out on the Maruzen first day of the annual Maruzen Pen Fair this year. Even though I did go afterwards, but I didn't really exert myself, let's say, to go to all and every event as I would have done in the previous years. But I think you're right. We really haven't seen too many interesting things going on, so I didn't really feel like I missed out on too much either.
Yeah, same for me. I think for 2024, the main event was the Star Stationery Station Festival in February. It was lots of glass pen makers, lots of fountain pen inks from all around Japan and international inks. I think it was the main, was it 3 weeks event before the Maruzen Spring Fair. And then from there, even the Maruzen Fair was a bit upsetting as they changed all the bottles of inks to the square sailor. So for all the one who used to collect this Maruzen special edition, you cannot have the same shape anymore. And then it was really quiet, and summer has all the international, like US pen fairs. We met in Yoseka, and it was quite a big event. But then even Kamihaku, I did only the March one, and September, I didn't feel the need to go back.
Yeah. Personally, I explored a lot of other hobbies. It's been a personal year of change and growth for me, professionally and personally as well. So overall, I think 2024 was a good year for me, a bad year for stationery.
A bad year for stationery. That's okay. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Sure. I think overall, globally, both in Japan and overseas, the word for 2024 in stationery was scandal.
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 It's like a K-drama.
Okay, well, I may have forgotten what happened then. What were the scandals I've forgotten about?
Well, globally, some of the big ones you saw, like obviously what happened with the Goulet Pen Company. There was a thing, but right. Then in Japan there was this Hobonichi paper. There's also, Hobonichi was also involved in this Taiwan-China scandal.
And then the launching of Hobonichi website was a big mess.
So, there was I think maybe it was more back half heavy, but to me this year was like the year of scandals. Not like, obviously I'm sensationalizing a little bit, but it wasn't everybody was happy this year. In the space.
Okay, yeah. I do remember the Goulet thing. We talked about it on one of our recent podcasts, which wasn't so recent because we don't do this very often nowadays. But Hobonichi, yeah, I followed that one very closely as well. I've been doing videos about it, explaining what happened. I think it had sort of a happy ending.
Happy ending for who, though?
Well, so it depends on what aspects you're talking about. If you're talking about the problems they had with the paper, I think they could have handled it better, of course. They could have been more responsive. They could have been faster. But clearly they were themselves taken aback, surprised, didn't really know what to do. I think that explains the delay in the responses. But I think they actually did, in the end, do the right thing. The fact that they actually went back, produced a new batch, and not just a new batch, we are hoping that it will be better this time, but they actually tweaked, or presumably they worked with Sanzen to tweak the formula and produced new planners with a different type of Tomoe River, which clearly has more coating, right? And they had this free exchange program, right? And they actually managed to execute on that. I think even though they were slow, I think in the end that they managed to do the right thing. So that thumbs up for me.
I agree that they did the right thing. I don't agree that it's a happy ending. They probably didn't want to do it and weren't like super happy about that. I think it was the best of the bad options that they had.
Yeah, but I think that ties into something else, which is that paper is just a really business to be in, and more so maybe than ever. I remember I had recently, or at Tips, had a discussion with a notebook maker, and this notebook maker was just lamenting the difficulty of ensuring, sourcing paper and ensuring consistent quality, and the margins were so bad, and then they also made this comment that and you have to compete with the likes of, Kokio. And the fact is that Kokio's campus paper, which is like ubiquitous and it's dirt cheap, is actually pretty darn good, right? So if you are to produce your own paper, your own notebooks, right, you have really margins. You have to deal with it. I mean, the inherent difficulty of ensuring consistent quality, and then you have the biggest giant in the stationery world, Kokio, being probably the only company that owns its means of production, and they are able to produce, really cheap, decent quality notebooks.
It's tough. Anyway, we'll get into the specifics. I'm sure in a bit. Khuê, the vibe check for you was similar to us. Good year for stationery. Bad year for stationery. Good year for me.
I would say bad year. I won't go until bad, but not as interesting year of stationery as usual. From Japan, from someone living in Japan, where usually it's really like non-stop new launching a new product. It was a little bit more calmer, and in my personal life, I was more engaged, like activism in this year with everything going on in the world. I'm not sure if I can go further, but yeah, that there's some genocide going on. So yeah, I was more engaged in that, and maybe a paper year for me, in like a lot of things going on with papers, either washi papers. We visit Echizen in Fukui, and we had collaboration with paper companies before going to Yoseka. Lots of paper, some glass pen, not that much ink, and almost no fountain pen, I think. Or maybe some vintage one, but I cannot remember if I got a fountain pen this year.
Yeah, and I think what's cool about this podcast is that we've been doing it for, 5 years now. I mean, it's crazy to think about because we started in 2020. And so the interesting thing is that, when you do a podcast for so long, it kind of follows your journey across time in this hobby, right? So I know for all of us, our fields of interest in the hobby has shifted, changed, and evolved. Jacob, you're now much more into the YouTube. You're like now a fully fledged kind of all mediums content creator. I see you on my TikTok all the time. But when we first started this podcast, it was almost like a acquisition heavy podcast, right? I don't think it's unfair to say that we spent a lot of time on Mercari. We spent a lot of time on Yahoo Auctions. We don't really do that anymore, And there was a time where we spent a lot of time on Kingdom No. We would every day at 12 o'clock. Oh, it's new. We got to refresh that Kingdom No. We don't do that anymore.
I remember that. Yeah, we were heavily into that, and we were sending messages, as you said. And I remember I set up a little custom scraping and push notifications if anything matched my filters, and then I could immediately buy something. And then it was a bit insane there for a while.
Yeah, and it's cool that we can see how we've evolved. But I think this year, like I said earlier, you've really gone full in on the long form creation. That's not just audio but also visual. For me, I'm delving into more of the business side of the aspect of the hobby. And I think for Khuê as well, right? Like now more deeply into the business side of the hobby. Even though for me and Khuê, we're kind of on a different angle when it comes to approaching the business. So I want to hear, Jacob, from you, this past year, even though we're not going to as many events, we're not doing it as acquisition as heavily, how did your hobby change this year for you personally and then, for the pens?
As you said, for me, it's been mostly about, getting into video. I've been sort of dipping my toes before, only really this year started doing that because I feel like there are interesting stories to tell, and I think video is the right way to do that. But then what I discovered is that, especially on TikTok, when I post videos, it's like a whole different kind of audience than I have on Instagram. Like on Instagram, the kind of people who watch my content, they are really deep in this hobby, right? They know the difference between a Karanuri and Nanakunuri. They can sort of smell the difference between a Bok and a Jovo nib, right? They really know their stuff. And so your content has to sort of be targeted toward them. On TikTok, I can make a video about, for example, like a pilot's new Kakuno, and everyone is asking me for a writing sample. It didn't occur to me that you would want that. Of course, you know how a Kakuno writes. Of course, you know how a pilot steel nib writes. No, but they don't. Right? It's a whole different audience that is new to all of this, and it's kind of refreshing in a way. I said, okay, let's start from the beginning. Let's actually explain the basics with my own sort of spin on it. Because I watch, for example, videos from, say, SBRE Brown, right? And on his millions review of a Jovo pen with a Jovo nib, he explains this is not a flex nib and this is quite stiff and so on. And I was wondering why do you need to explain that again? But it turns out that there's a big audience that are still very new to this, and it's kind of exciting to be able to explain to that audience. So that's sort of what keeps the hobby fresh and interesting to me now. I have a lot of videos in the pipeline now, some very basic stuff and some more in-depth stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube is just it's a much bigger audience too, right? Because of the way that their algorithm works. And I'm not a big YouTube watcher, or at least not for stationary content. I watch YouTube for other things, but I'm very I search for the keywords, I find the video that I want, and then I watch. I don't watch I don't go on YouTube the way that I would maybe on a TikTok or Instagram just to doom scroll. But I know, Jacob, you are a big YouTube watcher, right? I think that's fair to say. So you're more dialed into how the YouTube side works. What's the mind of a YouTube viewer?
What's the mind of a YouTube viewer?
Yeah, do you just click on random videos to watch them? How do you discover new content?
The algorithm does sometimes a surprisingly good job of suggesting content, but there's also external things. Sometimes there are people posting on especially if you talk about stationary, people posting on threads and elsewhere about their YouTube videos, and I follow that and discover it. But most of the time it's on the platform. But to be honest, even though you're saying I'm watching a lot of YouTube videos, to be honest, I'm not actually watching that much stationary content on YouTube. It's mostly other kinds of content, geopolitics, economics, and stuff like that. And part of that is that I think the content needs to be visually interesting, right? Yeah. And I think the content creators that are really good at that. They are the people Mr. Hoosterboss who's doing electronic stuff. You have Johnny Harris who's doing a lot of very good sort of politics. That's the kind of content that I really enjoy watching, because it's both informational and visually interesting. And I don't think much of the stationary content, to be honest, is really at that level.
Which is so funny, because stationary is inherently, a visual medium, right? Mm-hmm.
But Alicia is doing well, for example. It's the stationary one that I watch the most on YouTube. But and then you have some, I think in the planner and more journal community, there's a lot of YouTuber showing how they either do their junk journal or how they decorate their travel journal, like Mika, our friend. And these are really interesting and nice visual and...
But
I think I see more sort of visually interesting stationary content on TikTok, to be honest. There are these accounts that I didn't know about these at all before, so Psycho Stationer and Bongo Store. I didn't know who they were before, but they have hundreds of thousands of views, and they do really sort of fast-paced, interesting content with good lighting, and that's a whole different level than some of the stationary content that we're familiar with.
But your stuff on TikTok's pretty good too.
I'm aiming to be visually interesting, but it's still work in progress.
All right, you heard it here first. Fude Fen is going to be the next viral TikTok star. But I think
we'll see.
We'll see. There's something to say about like if we're doing an audio podcast, right? Like a podcast like ours is not going to pop off. It's not going to go viral unless it's like about that. I think one of our most successful episodes was still today the one about Tomoe River where they changed hands and we were discussing Tomoe River there. What happened about Tomoe River. But that was because Tomoe River news popped off somewhere else, and then they linked to our podcast, and so people who really, really, really cared, right? But if you're, let's say, on the periphery, and you're new, and you're not really that deep into it, but you like using it, you're not necessarily seeking out Tokyo Inklings, the podcast, whereas on YouTube, on TikTok, you'd be much likelier to discover something like that. So I do agree with you.
Especially TikTok. I mean, one thing that is so rewarding about TikTok is that it's more about the individual content, right? If you manage to create a good video, then it doesn't really matter how big your channel is, right? The content itself can just explode, right? While it's more of a slog on YouTube.
TikTok is also not about like the very cinematic, beautiful slow shots. It's more like, hey, let's how do we get as much funny content out there as we can? But yeah, that's pretty cool. And do you think that's influenced? I mean, you mentioned earlier that it's changed or it's reinvigorated your enjoyment of the hobby, but has it changed any of your behaviors?
Only in the sense that I think differently about what kind of products I would talk about. So, for example, one of the most interesting releases I think is Pilot's new Kakuno, that's Madoromi, the pastel colored ones, right? That's the kind of product that I think would do very well on. Well, it did do very well on TikTok, right? But that's not the kind of product that I have traditionally been really particularly interested in and focusing on, but now with a new perspective, which is what kind of content can I make videos about? I look at different products.
That's pretty cool. Khuê, what about you?
Yeah, I think I was. Yeah, I'm not testing ink anymore for Ferris Wheel Press this year. It was too much at some point. I cannot follow anymore, and so I think I was more concentrate on, using whatever I have, like hundreds of bottles of inks. It will take me maybe 10 lifetimes to finish all of them. And using them either for calligraphy or journaling and testing more papers and, trying to just use my stash. It was a lot of trips and exploration, so it was nice in that sense where I learned a lot about either companies or how craft people make things, and this was really interesting. I don't know, most of you know, but I work with Ayako for Cute Thing from Japan, so we often have some trips going around to either for her newsletters, as she joined for every orders a little newsletters, or for collaboration we have in the future meeting with like craft makers. So it was a very rich year in this approach.
Yeah, and I think similar to you, Khuê, for me, because 2024 was the first full year of business for Kyuseido, it at least definitely changed my approach to fountain pens in general. For one, I've been buying a lot less because now I'm focusing on how to make things. But in that process, I'm also rethinking going out to meet craftspeople, to meet producers, to meet manufacturers, talk to them, understand the process behind that. Obviously, I had some connections or I don't know if it's obvious, but I had some connections in the past. But then, really being in the factory, really being in front of the craftspeople to see how they work their magic is a different experience. And when you're in that, you have a renewed appreciation for the process, because as a consumer, I think it's very easy to just see the final product and what's on the shelf, and of course that's really important. But I think a lot of consumers might miss, for example, something might look very easy, right? Like Jacob, you brought up paper just now. Paper is so ubiquitous. It must look very easy to produce paper, to produce notebooks, whereas in fact it's extremely difficult. And Hobonichi kind of proved that, right? I wouldn't say they're a paper company, but they had produced notebooks for many, many, many years. And yet they faced this huge issue this year. And, for a while, it seemed like they were really just bewildered for a couple months as to what to do. And their solution came pretty late. So it's something that, I have a newfound appreciation for. Something else I was talking to Khuê earlier on our train back from Yodobashi. We're talking about shipping and how shipping is just extremely expensive and has ballooned in costs, right? Shipping a product to the US is now, 5,000, 6,000 yen easily, if you don't want to wait for, 3 months. So while a lot of bigger companies, they do like free shipping thresholds, it's definitely something that I don't expect from any company that I buy to have free shipping, right? If they do offer free shipping, great, that's a bonus. But if they don't, it's totally understandable. I think I've de-Amazoned myself from that kind of mindset.
Another thing I've noticed from you, CY, last year is that you have almost completely stopped publishing anything on social media. I'm talking both your own personal account and Khuê, but you have managed to get sort of other people to talk about your products. So would you say that is very intentional, that you're sort of moving towards sort of influencer marketing as an approach for Khuê, or what is explaining your new approach?
Yeah, I mean, how much time do we have? So the Tokyo Station Pens account, lack of posting is on one hand a little bit of laziness, so I have to take that, I have to accept that, but I will make a post later today. But on the other hand, it's also the things that you can say as one individual influencer is very different from what you can say as a brand. And I think right now full-time Khuê is really still only me, but we do from time to time employ other people, take other people on, and that's a big responsibility, right? By the way, we are looking to and we'll probably be able to hire somebody next year. We're in pretty deep talks with this person, but it's when you hire somebody, even for just an event, right? You're not just hiring them; you're hiring their entire family. You have a lot of responsibility there, because if you're not able to, let's say, pay out the salary, then it's not just one person that suffers, it's their entire family that does. So some things that I want to say about various world events, I am keeping to myself. Not because it's not the right thing to do, or it is the right thing to do, but I think it's now placed me in a more difficult position to be as expressive. Or, for example...
So you're saying this is true for both your brand account and also for your personal account? Because you're saying that even though if you're posting on your personal account, it's sort of implicitly QZ because you are QZ, so there's a limit to how controversial you can be on your personal account.
I think there definitely is that. There definitely is, and how many times have we seen CEOs saying something in their personal lives and gets brought out. But for example, this Hobonichi thing, or I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit later, the incident or the drama surrounding the Goulet Pen Company late summer. There are a lot of things that I want to personally say about that, but it then impacts how do I have to say something on every issue right after this? How will other vendors see this? I don't want to trash talk other vendors. I don't want to trash talk other manufacturers, and I wouldn't want them to do the same for me. So it's more hard now for me to publish a post about Wancher, for example, than it was 2 years ago. Obviously, I still believe in whatever I said about Wancher back in the day. It's just that there's a different level of responsibility there today, and I don't want people to say, oh, see what I said this, so never going to buy from him again, and that impacts everybody, right? That impacts the people that we work with, and not just people that work with us directly, right? The artisans that we work with that have really nothing to do with any of this probably don't even know who all of these people are. They're going to get impacted if we can't sell the products that we ask them to produce. So there's a little bit of a responsibility there.
Okay, but so then what about podcasting? Do you feel like 40 minutes into a podcast, that's when you potentially can express your thoughts more freely because it's not sort of something that people will likely just clip out and refer to? Or what's your thinking of podcasting as a brand owner?
Yeah, I still try to be careful about what I say, and I'll bring up an example that was that kind of briefly blew up on Reddit. So there was this thing where people found Brian Goulet saying that because they've built up trust in the community for the past X number of years, they are able to charge higher prices than everybody else. And this was brought into Reddit, and we had a lot of people saying, "Oh, that's so scummy. That's a very bad thing for Goulet to say," even though it was on a more business-oriented podcast rather than a fountain pen one. But I think that's taken out of context, right? Because what he really means is Goulet's not charging above MSRP retail price on any of their products. It's just that they very often don't do the quote-unquote street pricing, or they don't do a lot of discounting on their website. And I think it's true. They have built up a lot of goodwill among their community over the past years. And trust is a form of social currency, right? So I think, when I'm on a podcast, like now, anything I say can be misconstrued. So even though just having this conversation might have people misconstruing whatever I'm saying, and then blowing up elsewhere, trying to stray away from the more, I guess, judgmental aspect that I think everybody does have. I have things that I think which can be quite judgmental, but I don't want to necessarily air out other people's dirty laundry.
But so leaving the sort of controversies out, if we're just talking about, what you would use as a marketing tool, because you have, your personal account has a fair number of subscribers, right? And now you're in a position where you have a company and you may have a new product and you want to get the word out. Do you still don't think that your personal account is the right place to do that? And if you don't think that, then what is for you now, what is the best way to get the word out? Is that influencer marketing, or is it some other marketing approach?
So your previous question and this question are connected. Your previous question asked, what about the professional account, the brand account, and I'm not posting that much on there either, and that is because I am lazy and have not gone out to take beautiful photos of my products, and that is something that I want to work on in 2025. It's something that I want to improve at for the brand. Whether using the personal account to promote the brand stuff is an appropriate path. It is for some brands, but it is not the path that I want to take for Khuê. And the reason is because right now there are two main reasons why people purchase a Khuê pen. The first reason is because they like me. As you say, I have now 10,000 followers on Tokyo Station pens, even though I post maybe once every half a year. And then the other reason is because they think the product is kind of cool. But I don't think this makes a successful brand. I think this is just part of the growing phase of that brand. I would like people to purchase Khuê products because they love the brand of Khuê, not because they love the brand of CY or the brand of Tokyo Station pens. So moving forward, the strategy is to strengthen the brand presence and brand identity. And right now we have limitations, right? Because we have basically two models in several different various colorations, but that's not really a brand identity. That's just a company that sells several products. We are actively working on developing a brand identity that carries through now multiple products. So in the next year, you can expect completely brand new products. I'm talking about new filling mechanisms. I'm talking about non-pen items. I'm talking about different materials, different designs. And we're trying to go slowly, but that is definitely something that we're trying to build up over time. And so I expect over the next 3 years, we will definitely move from, I hope that people move from buying the stuff because they like CY to buying the stuff because they like Khuê. We have a very incredible stamp that was designed by Aijing. We're going to have other collaborations with other artists, and the strategy moving forward about how to promote the brand is that the brand is, in a way, impersonal, right? It's a canvas for the brand, and then we want the more personal connection, the more personal aspect to come from people who are not associated with the brand. So if you like the product and you want to talk about the product, it should come from people who are actually using it. It shouldn't come from me because I'm obviously biased. It shouldn't come from the brand because the brand thinks that whatever the brand does is the best thing ever.
Going back to the question is, how do you get the word out? It sounds like you're saying that you don't think that the brand account is going to be the way to do that. It sounds like you're saying that you want people to buy the product and then, be excited about it and post sort of organic type content. But they need to buy it first to do that. And to do that, they need to be aware of this sort of catch-22, right? So how do you initially get the word out to a broader audience?
So the customer acquisition part is... some people, they just randomly stumble upon us. Some people, they do stumble upon us because of certain YouTube videos, which is very important for us. And like you said, influencer marketing. Hopefully late next year, we'll be able to start a retailer program. So we'll have different retailers carry our product. We are actually starting a pilot program here already in Japan. You can find Khuê products at Pen and Message. But once we, like I said earlier, build out our portfolio of products, then we'll be able to move into retail stores because we need an assortment of products in order to have a good display in a retail store. Right now, we're not ready for that, but in the next, hopefully in the next year, we'll have the product assortment to justify being in very select retail stores and have people discover us through that aspect as well.
So Cusido will become the next plotter, right? Is it what you aim for?
I am not sure if plotter is the right analogy. I have a goal in mind, but I'm not going to say it now.
No, what I mean is like when you said that you want people to like the product for the product itself and not because who is creating it. I think Plotter did it quite quickly in a quite short time, right?
Yeah.
Since the first time when you two talk about it on the podcast and now when you look around, everyone has a Plotter, right?
Yeah. But did that answer the question, Jacob?
It sounds like the TLDR is that you don't think that your own social media will be the main way to get the word out. You want to work with retailers and you want eventually like organic content, well, organic and inorganic, if you can call influencer marketing that, but basically not so much your own accounts, but content coming from elsewhere.
Yes, my account in the ideal world would not be the main driver of new acquisition.
Okay.
All right, and then Khuê, you mentioned also going to Fukui. Maybe it's a good time to also say I also went to Fukui to see paper. So in the next year, we will hopefully develop something with paper. We will hopefully develop something on a lower cost model for fountain pens and develop a wide assortment of accessories. So that'll be interesting. So yeah.
That's interesting that you're saying that. I mean, sort of going back to what we said earlier, but there's a clear trend in the industry, a pretty sort of depressing negative trend where the paper manufacturing is being consolidated and shut down. So we talked recently about how bank paper going away, and the reason why bank paper is going away is because Mitsubishi Paper. If you look at the financial results, they are doing really badly, and they say that they have very expensive aging equipment at Takasago. They need to shut that down, which is very similar to what happened. It's sort of almost like deja vu. If you read the justifications for Tomogawa shutting down their machinery and Mitsubishi Paper, it's really the same story. That demand isn't there, and what I'm kind of worried about industry-wise is that my understanding, and to be honest, I'm not an expert in this, but my understanding is that the vast majority of companies that are selling paper in some form of notebooks, they don't own the means of production. So, for example, like Tsubame notebooks, they're some of the most beloved, popular notebooks in Japan. They don't own the manufacturing. Like they just go to Oji Paper. So there are two big conglomerates in Japan. Right? You have Oji Paper and Nihon Paper, and they have this enormous organizations, right? And they have a small number of plants that are able to produce the kind of paper that you want to your specifications, right? And they are consolidating over and over. And if you are in individual notebook manufacturer like Life or Tsubame, and I would imagine, I mean, you probably know better than I, but I would imagine that not even Design Field own their own means of production for Midori MD Design, DP Paper, and so on, right? So I think you have a lot of these stationary companies that are asking one of the Nihon Paper or one of the Oji Paper companies to produce paper to a spec, but these two big paper conglomerates, they are just looking at the numbers and they are forced to consolidate. They are forced to shut down. And if you are a little notebook maker that makes like 10,000, 100,000 notebooks a year, then you don't really have any say in the future of that plant, right? So I worry that we're going to have more and more of these notebook makers forcing to either just discontinue products or just change the paper and just adapt to this reality. So do you agree with that outlook? And if so, how does that play into your decision to produce a notebook?
Yeah, we've seen this before because that's what happened to fountain pens some 60, 50 years ago, right? But I think that specialty paper will continue to exist. I don't think the problem... I mean, there is obviously a problem of sales and demand and all this stuff. But I think a bigger problem is, are we going to have people to man the machines to actually make the paper? For me, that is a bigger problem. Whether these papers will continue to exist, they will continue to exist, but I think you're going to see a consolidation of the, let's say, middle of the road papers, but a reduction in specialty papers, which will be more and more expensive. But I think those specialty papers will become better. So Khuê and I and Ayaka, we're talking to a paper company who, as you rightly point out, do not actually physically make the paper themselves. But we did go to the factory, and Khuê and I, we tested some papers, and we gave our feedback on the certain specs that we wanted them to reach. And of course, I think this paper will become very expensive. But I think for those in the hobby, I think that's fine. I think that's completely acceptable that you have a choice between the Kokyo Campus, which is very cheap, and then a very expensive but specialty paper. I don't think everybody needs access to the specialty paper. And I know that sounds like a very elitist thing to say, but I think specialty paper is for specialty use. And it's okay because Kokyo Campus it's pretty good.
Tsubame paper is really fountain pen friendly, very accessible.
So I think like the Tomoe River Sanzen, that should probably get more expensive, and it will get more expensive. But
even just increasing the price of certain like exotic notebooks, I'm not sure if that is enough to sustain production at these plants, because like what is different if you look at ink and fountain pens, the barrier to entry is very low, right? Anyone, quote unquote, anyone can make their own ink on their own fountain pen, or at least get the equipment necessary. You may need to take out a loan to get a CNC controlled machine, etc., right? But the barrier to entry is relatively low, which just explains why you have so many like one-person ink shops and pen shops, right? But that is very much not the case with papers. We know that some paper manufacturers that they have made smaller, more efficient machines, but we haven't seen so far, to my knowledge, any of those machines being able to produce, paper for printing. They are meant for highly specialized paper for medical industry, industrial applications. So what I haven't seen yet, and I'm not sure if we will see, is anyone being able to produce at a relatively small scale the kind of paper that we want for our notebooks, even if we're talking about relatively expensive notebooks. So don't you think there's a risk that even these expensive notebooks, being Graphilo and whatnot, it might not be enough volume?
I don't, because I think what you're talking about with the large machines and making paper at industrial scale is the fountain pen equivalent of having injection molding machines. But then the lower barrier of entry, the garage people, Khuê and I, we made our own paper in basically a garage, and that we went to a factory where it's not heavily machine dependent. It's more human dependent. But I don't think those papers make it out to the market because they are expensive, because nobody's looking at them yet. But the people that we went with told us, yeah, actually, manga artists use this paper. So like One Piece is using this paper that is made in this factory. It's not just a run-of-the-mill thing, but because One Piece is extremely successful, so they get to use, I don't know, like a 10,000 yen per piece paper or whatever. And like calligraphers, they specially order paper. And so I asked the company, I said, very directly, I said, hey, do you think you're going to go out of business? And they said, well, we have a issue with people who can make the paper, but not the demand. In fact, the demand is so high that if you order paper now, it will take you months to receive it because they don't have enough people to make it.
Okay, so this is very highly specialized paper then. So what you're saying then is that there's some sort of bifurcation in the market where you have your Kokyo campus, and you have this very expensive, highly specialized, but in between you might see fewer and fewer options.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I agree. Individuals are not going out and buying paper making machines.
Right.
Yeah. So I think, Khuê, you are also deeply into paper. What do you think?
Maybe the analogy could be with clothes, right? Like there's this high-end designer clothing that most people cannot afford, and then you have this more like a prêt-à-porter. It could be similar now.
H&M or
exactly
Uniqlo.
this fast fashion a bit, and maybe we need to find something in the question is there anything in between, like something similar to our Tomei River that can be accessible, not too expensive, but having all the quality we need for fountain pen users or art calligraphy watercolor users. That's the question, right? I don't know. That's still it's why we are visiting craft people and papers company, because that's still what we are searching for.
Yeah, the Goldilocks days may be over of the $100 gold nib pen, right? And that's still happening in the fountain pen industry today. But I think for the Khuê brand, we're not really super interested in making a notebook out of Tomoe River because so many people already do it. So, why would they buy it from us? But if we release a really specialty paper that's really cool, has an amazing story, it's not something that you would use in maybe your
not for swatching
every day.
Yeah, not for swatching. I think something maybe more important.
Or maybe you just really like the product and you use it every day. That would be fine too. But Tomoe River, I don't think Tomoe River has an interesting story. Like, it doesn't have an origin story, but it's great. It's a great paper, right? Like a Pilot Custom 74 doesn't have a great origin story, but it's a great pen. Versus, let's say, like a
Nakaya.
Like a Nakaya or a Namiki or something like that. That does have a great story, but it's more highly specialized.
Yeah, we're talking about craft. So, like, the paper that we visit, the people that make it, you see them making it. It's really all the I would say knowledge they put in one sheet of paper. It cannot compare with copy papers or
Yeah, you're not putting this in a printer.
Yeah, exactly. It's not combini notebooks and stuff like that, which are still very efficient and good for whatever people need to do. So it's two different categories, but maybe Tomoe River is coming to an end as we all tested with the Hobonichi this year, and there will be something new coming from it.
Yeah. At
some point, there is room for it. So some companies maybe will try something by accident and will release something that will be the new Tomoe River. And there will be something out there. Midori is still doing good. It's cream, but it's still doing good.
And Yusari is really good.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think Design Feel and I don't think Nakabayashi either own their own means of production. I think they are relying on an external a vendor to produce that paper, and so they can produce, they can sell those notebooks as long as it makes financial sense for this paper manufacturer, which is probably one of the Audio or Nihon Paper group companies, right? As long as it makes sense for them to keep the machines running. So see why with this highly specialized manual, the sort of labor-intensive paper that you're talking about, do you think still that is a sustainable long-term business, or do you think that is more of sort of labor of love from someone who's like semi-retired and, you know, want to keep things going?
Both. The paper that I'm looking at is actually machine-made, but with craftspeople involved in it. So it's not just really pushing a button. It's somewhere in the middle. And we are talking with both the manufacturer and the people who will then make the paper into books.
But I wouldn't imagine that what you're talking about is kind of a one-off limited edition batch, and it's maybe sort of marketing for your brand as well. It might not be, maybe I'm wrong, it might not be something you're intending to be like a long-term volume seller for Khuê. So maybe you don't care, but if you are Nakabayashi, if you are Designfield, if you are Tsubame, I think you're in a different position, because if you have a notebook that is like one of your volume sellers.
I think it could be a long seller though. Khuê, what do you think? I mean, based on the conversations that we had, I think this is something that we want to bring, not just for Khuê, but, you know, this paper in general. I think it could be very interesting in large volumes. So we're not really looking at a one-off.
I'm more questioning the sustainable future of making paper, where we know that how much water, like fresh, like clear water, we need to use. And at some point, we talk with the, can I say name? It's like brand, like Yoshikawa Papers company, and they are producing this Wakami, who is this washi fountain pen friendly paper. And as they are when they produce a lot of, like a big part of the production goes into trash because it doesn't go through the quality inspection, they decide to do this Sutenai paper. So it's 100% recycled washi paper. So they reuse all the white Torinoko paper who didn't go through the quality check, and mix it with cardboard, recycled paper that you got from shopping bags, boxes and stuff like that. And they have this very interesting pattern paper, a little bit like beige, brownish, washi, recycle, who is fountain pen friendly, watercolor friendly, and even I test with some chroma shading ink, work very well. So I think that's maybe this kind of question paper company can go into, because at some point, what do we do with all the waste that we create while doing papers? Cannot just burn them, right? So what can we do to not lose? My question was for Hobonichi too. What do they do with all the 5 years agenda that people send back? They cannot use them. They cannot resell them. They're impossible to use. What would they do? Just burn them? Oh, that's a big question I have for them.
But yeah, I think the paper is hard, 100%. But I think they will continue. I don't think the future where there will be no fountain pen friendly papers is close.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, at very least, I don't think you're going to see Kokyo stop producing paper anytime soon, because again, they are unique in that they are so big that they actually own the means of production. They have their own plants, machines, factories, and Kokyo Campus is Japan's best-selling notebook by far. And between that and, you know, the copy paper, everything, I'm sure they have enough output to justify keeping their machines running for a foreseeable future. Yeah.
So I think we might not go into too much of the scandals of 2024. just because of time, but we've mentioned them quite a bit in the past already. But I think, yeah, it's we spoke also about Toma River and Hobonichi this time. So I don't think we need to go too deeply into that. But let's move to the last part of this podcast, which at the end of the year, we always try to have some predictions.
At the beginning of the year.
Beginning of the year. Well, at the end of the year, we see if our predictions were right. Yes. And then at the beginning of the year, which is the same day, we try to make some predictions in the future. So my prediction last year was that I was thinking we would see more diversity in the offerings, because if you don't differentiate yourself from the competition, it's going to be much harder to grab the attention and, as you say, acquire new customers. I don't think we have seen so much in that kind of differentiation, unfortunately, but I think that therefore some retailers have 100% definitely suffered. Reading, for example, Sailor's financial statements, they've been losing money this year. I think they're one of the big ones that didn't really differentiate. The interesting thing about Sailor is that they didn't differentiate from themselves, right? So they were just basically doing the same thing that they had been doing for the past couple of years, and people just were sick of it. Whereas Pilot, I didn't read the financials there, but Pilot came out with the Crossland 823, as well as the number 3 plus Sparkly Sailor. Sparkly Pilot.
Who looks like a sailor.
That looks like a sailor, which I thought were both pretty good and pretty successful. And I think I did call last year that Pilot, with their US exclusive, the Verdigris, that they were trying to experiment more with colors. So I think, at least that part was accurate. Khuê, what your prediction last year?
I was expecting brand who kind of struggle a bit. I was giving the example of Shachihata ink pads, as they don't have as many people doing Hanko anymore, the name stamp, that they release interesting new product. They did last year the markers that you can use on masking tape and then stamp with their pad on it, and it will stay on the masking tape. But I'm not sure. I don't remember I see anything that interesting or funny. Maybe I missed some stuff, but yeah, I was expecting more, maybe new product, non-seen yet product in the stationery field. So not that much to say from my point of view.
And Jacob?
So I didn't remember what I predicted, but Khuê reminded me before the podcast, and apparently I said something to the effect of Sailor needs to do something or they will be in trouble, right? And I think they pinned their hopes, and we talked about that many months ago, maybe a year ago. They pinned their hopes on low-cost steel nib fountain pens, and they mentioned that explicitly. I can't remember how many months it was, but that was key to their turnaround strategy. There was something they mentioned in their report, and then of course they did execute on that. They did release to much fanfare the Sailor Tsuzu, and a lot of unusual amount of marketing and promotion for Sailor. They said they spent 5 years on it, a special website and a display, prominent displays at all stationery stores. It was a really big bet, right? So that was supposed to be presumably their big turnaround strategy. Since then, there's been a worrying absence of mentioning of Tsuzu in anything from Sailor. Like if you look at their earnings reports since then, they haven't mentioned the impact of Tsuzu, and they keep saying that sales are down, costs are up, they keep increasing their borrowing, right? Which suggests that it didn't really pan out, right? We talked about Tsuzu, and at least I said It's got a snap cap. It's got a pretty good nib, I believe, and the section is quite nice. But it didn't. But then I think see why you said it's kind of too expensive for what it is, and it's very hard to compete with Pilot Lightive and Kakuno. And if you go now to Amazon's top 10 list, it's not even in the top. I think it's like 19 or 20. In Amazon's bestseller rankings, and the only reason why it's there, I believe, is that right now there's like this time sale where you can get it for half the price, right? So to me, it looks like Tuso didn't pan out the way seller expected, and they are bleeding more than ever. So I think next year will be when we actually see Plus reining in Sailor and taking more command of. And basically it's going to be the year when we see what Plus themselves had in mind when they took over Sailor. Because right now Sailor's not going anywhere, right? So 2025 will be the year when we see Plus taking control of the Sailor properly.
So remind the audience, and mostly me, I believe that Plus did complete their acquisition of Sailor, right?
Yes.
So, the good news is that Sailor isn't necessarily going to go bankrupt. In that way, they will still have some access to funding so long as Plus sees fit. So a couple bad years is not a death sentence for them. But the bad news is that then Plus can just be like, okay, we're done with this. So that'll be interesting. Sailor spent a lot of money on the new factory this year too. So yeah, we'll see what, as you say, we'll see what Plus does with them.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is it might be just a matter of right sizing Sailor, right? Does Sailor really need to make their own injection molding robots? Does Sailor really need to make their own ballpoints that are very much Me-Too product that don't stand out, right? Does Sailor really need to make a new King of Pen every 2 months, which kind of saturates the market and sort of lowers the value of whatever you bought 2 months ago? So, I mean, I think fundamentally they make good pens. I think there's something there if you right size it, and I have a feeling that might be happening in the future.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, then quick predictions for 2025. Khuê, you want to start us off?
No idea.
Okay, so maybe I can start.
Start and I think about.
I think 2025, we'll see more, or I hope to see more collaboration and more co-branding. I think that'll be very cool. But I think we are headed into a year of economic uncertainty. I was confident last year that the yen would recover. Obviously, that did not happen due to a variety of reasons. But I think, with the results of the geopolitics that we have now, electoral politics, I think we're headed into another year of strong dollar, which that's another podcast. But I think Japanese companies will continue to suffer or benefit from. Well, they'll benefit from the yen being weak when they're exporting, but they'll suffer because they have to import all of their raw materials. So, in my opinion, I expect more price increases across the board, across the world. So things will not be getting cheaper. And in fact, we will probably do our own price increase because of the increased cost, both in labor and in gold and in other materials manufacturing costs. Jacob, you got a prediction?
Sort of continuation of what you're saying. In response to the fountain pen manufacturers increasing prices, I think this is going to be the year when we see a lot more Chinese pens in the stores. Again, going back to Amazon's rankings, I was looking at the rankings in Japan. I think like one third of the top 10 selling fountain pens on Amazon are either sort of Chinese things, brands like Asvin, or these drop shipping brands like Dryden pens, Ellington pens, Woodsworths, right? And it's even more dramatic in the US. Like half of the top selling pens are either Chinese brands like Asvin or these dropshipping brands. And I think the demand for those low priced, relatively good pens is just going to increase when the homegrown brands, their products are just going to be increasingly priced out the range, especially if you want something more interesting like the different filling system, if you want to, titanium pen, if you want, interesting colors, etc. It's going to be very attractive to buy these Chinese pens, and since they're doing so well on Amazon, I have to assume that we're going to see more of those in stores. We've already seen a little bit of those in stores. Like if you go to like Family Mart, they have these like rebranded Jinhao pens. If you go to more stationery stores, you find these Fonte, which are Chinese pens. I think we're going to see even more of that, because I think the stores will want to be able to offer products at an affordable price. So more Chinese pens.
And I think you're onto something, because the Chinese domestic market is in shambles, right? So even the Chinese manufacturers, they'll probably be wanting to look overseas to improve their situation. So there's a great meeting of needs there, where I think because the quality is actually so good right now, right? I mean, now Chinese pens are they're just incredible price for value, because they don't do branding, and they don't do well. One thing is that the Chinese manufacturers, they don't know how to do retail, so that'll be a weakness for them. So often you have to buy directly from AliExpress. But it will be interesting to see if they come into stores.
What you will see are these middlemen like Fonte, like Ellington, whatever, right? That they know the Japanese market. They import. They do OEM, white label, whatever. They get them into the stores in Japan, and I think that's how it's going to work. And just one more thing based on what you said about the Chinese market. You said that Pilot is doing well. Pilot increased its sales everywhere except for China, as you said, because the Chinese market is in shambles. So this is sort of the
global headlines.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Khuê.
Yeah, I hope we can see some. I will be happy to see some innovative product. Like
you'll get at least one.
Yeah, I guess at least one. Okay. Yes, I have the impression that for example, Sailor didn't. Yeah, we know they are not doing well, but didn't launch any special pen or limited edition pen for a while. So let's see how 2025 will bring some brand to just release at least one interesting new product.
Yeah. And I think it's not a prediction, but a hope. I hope that we will make limited editions great again. Mm-hmm. Because I think there are too many limited editions that are just thrown out there because, limited edition sells.
Yeah.
But I want limited edition products that have story behind them, that have meaning behind them.
Exactly.
More Mont Blanc and more Monte Grappa than what Sailor's doing.
I happen to have purchased both of the Mont Blanc pens, the 100th anniversary of the Meisterstück, the Origin, and the 100th anniversary Olympic pen. So I do like those.
Nice. I think both Mont Blanc and Monte Grappa, maybe even Graf von Faber-Castell, they do limited editions well in that there is, as you said, there's a story, there's a thoughtful design. You feel like there's not just going to be another new, like 2 months later, that is slightly different, right? If it feels like what you're buying is properly limited, right? And it's now or never.
Or in the case of Sailor, days later.
Yeah.
All right, so I think that pretty much closes out our episode. We've gone on for quite a while, but Jacob, thank you as always. Khuê, thank you as always.
Thank you to both of you.
Us. And I think this was a good episode. We didn't really have an outline, but I think we did well. So, congrats, pat our own backs. But thank you also to the listeners for a wonderful year. I know that we haven't been recording so much in terms of our output. But, as we said at the top of this episode, we've all been, we've all evolved also and become more busy in our lives. I think that this once every 4-ish months pace is actually pretty good. I'm actually enjoying this. What about you, Jacob?
I think that works well. We have enough to talk about, even if you don't create a list ahead of the show, right? There's going to be enough new material between the shows, because that's what was difficult before. We were sort of scraping the internet for there's been a new Nagasawa release, and that's sort of all we have to talk about.
Or you'd have to buy stuff, right? But now it's more relaxed. So hopefully next year we keep this pace at once every 3 or 4 months. We're not going to make a commitment to say, we're going to record once every 1st of January, April 1 or whatever. But hopefully we'll be able to do something similar. So with that, I think we're ready to close the podcast. So thank you very much. This is Tokyo Inklings. I am CY. You can find me on Instagram at Tokyo Station Pens. Our company Qseido at Qseido, as well as on the internet at QSeidoTokyo.com.
And my name is Jacob, and I am Fudo Fan on YouTube and elsewhere.
And my name is Khuê. Thank you for having me. You can find me on Instagram at MiraiCat. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.